At the Thornwell Estate's glittering ballroom, 12-year-old Amara Bennett stands frozen beside her mother's serving cart as champagne flutes shatter across marble floors. Every wealthy white face turns toward her in shock. She just shouted something in flawless French that made the room go silent. Richard Thornwell's $17 million Monet, the centerpiece of tonight's gala, hangs innocently on the velvet wall behind her. Dr. Helena Vandermeer, America's most respected art authenticator, had just authenticated it 30 minutes ago. But Amara saw something nobody else noticed, something that would destroy powerful people. 3 hours earlier, Amara had arrived at the Thornwell estate clutching her mother's hand, trying to make herself as small as possible. Claudia Bennett had been working for Manhattan's wealthiest families for 15 years, cleaning their homes, serving at their parties, and teaching her daughter the most important survival skill for black domestic workers in white wealthy spaces: invisibility. Stay silent, stay helpful, and never, ever draw attention to yourself. The Thornwell estate sprawled across a full city block on the Upper East Side, a limestone mansion that looked like it had been transported from a French palace. Tonight, nearly 200 guests filled the grand ballroom, their designer gowns and tailored suits probably worth more than Amara and her mother would earn in a decade. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in silk, where servers in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Amara wore her nicest dress, a simple navy blue one from a thrift store, and tried not to feel out of place among all this casual wealth. Her mother had given her strict instructions during the subway ride from their tiny Bronx apartment. Help serve when needed, stay out of conversations, and whatever you do, don't speak unless spoken to. Amara had nodded, understanding the unspoken message beneath those words. People like them existed in spaces like this only to serve, and forgetting that could cost them everything. But Amara had a secret her mother didn't fully understand. While Claudia cleaned houses during the day, Amara spent her time at the public library, teaching herself languages from books and free YouTube videos. She was fluent in French, Italian, German, and Mandarin, driven by a hunger to understand the world beyond their small apartment. And she studied art history obsessively, devouring every book and documentary she could find, dreaming of working in museums despite knowing that girls like her, black girls from the Bronx with mothers who cleaned toilets, didn't belong in those spaces. The unveiling ceremony began at exactly 8 o'clock. Richard Thornwell, a billionaire technology investor with silver hair and a smile that never reached his cold blue eyes, stood before the crowd with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. He boasted about acquiring a lost Monet for $17 million, a painting that had been missing from public record for over 80 years, discovered in a private European collection. The crowd oohed and ahed appropriately. Then Dr. Helena Vandermeer took the microphone, her white hair perfectly coiffed, her tailored suit speaking of old money and older connections. For 40 years, she had been the final word in art authentication, her reputation sterling and unquestioned. She spoke about the painting's provenance, the scientific testing she had conducted, the undeniable proof that this was genuine Monet from his late water lily period. The velvet covering dropped away, revealing the painting in all its glory. The crowd applauded. Amara had been serving canapes near the back of the room, but as guests surged forward to admire the painting, she found herself pushed closer, close enough to actually see the brushwork clearly. And that's when her heart stopped. The brushstrokes were wrong. Monet's technique in his late period, when cataracts had affected his vision, had a specific quality, a certain looseness and boldness that came from both his failing eyesight and decades of mastery. These brushstrokes were too careful, too deliberate, too precise. They were the work of someone copying Monet's style without understanding the physical and emotional reality behind it. Her pulse quickened. She knew she was right. She had studied Monet's progression obsessively, could recognize his work from any period by the distinctive way he layered paint and built up color. This painting had the right colors, the right composition, but the execution was off by just enough that someone who truly knew Monet's work would catch it. A guest standing near her, an elegant French woman in a black gown, spoke to her companion in French, commenting on how the beauty of the water lilies reminded her of visiting Giverny. Something in Amara snapped. Maybe it was months of watching her mother scrub floors for people who treated her like furniture. Maybe it was years of hiding her intelligence, of being told through 1,000 small actions that she didn't belong in spaces dedicated to art and beauty. Maybe it was simply that she couldn't watch everyone celebrate something she knew was wrong. She spoke clearly and loudly in perfect French, explaining that the brushstroke technique didn't match Monet's documented style from his late period, that the layering of paint showed hesitation rather than the bold confidence of a master who had painted water lilies hundreds of times. The room fell absolutely silent. People turned to stare at this black child in a thrift store dress who had dared to speak, and in perfect French no less. Doctor, people like them existed in spaces like this only to serve, and forgetting that could cost them everything. But Amara had a secret her mother didn't fully understand. While Claudia cleaned houses during the day, Amara spent her time at the public library, teaching herself languages from books and free YouTube videos. She was fluent in French, Italian, German, and Mandarin, driven by a hunger to understand the world beyond their small apartment. The journal described Monet's specific technique during the water lily period, details that contradicted several aspects of this painting's execution. A younger Asian man in a museum staff badge pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. Marcus Chen, a junior curator at a smaller Manhattan gallery, looked up with wide eyes. The journal exists. The girl is quoting it accurately. The room erupted in chaos. Dr. Vandermeer stepped forward, her voice dripping with condescension and barely concealed rage. A child with internet access thinks she knows better than me? She gestured dismissively at Amara. I have been authenticating masterpieces since before this girl was born. I have worked with every major museum in the world. And you're going to let some maid's daughter disrupt this event with half-understood nonsense she picked up online? The emphasis on maid's daughter hit like a slap. Several guests nodded in agreement, their expressions a mixture of relief that someone had put the girl in her place and irritation that the help had gotten above her station. Richard Thornwell's face had gone purple with rage, the veins in his neck standing out prominently. His voice boomed across the ballroom. How dare you bring your child here to embarrass me? To disrupt my event? This is what happens when people forget their place, when they're given opportunities above their station. Security, remove them both immediately. Claudia's grip on Amara's arm tightened painfully, her voice breaking as she begged her daughter to apologize, to take it back, to do anything to make this stop. Amara could feel her mother's terror, understanding in that moment just how much she had risked with her words. Claudia had built a career, fragile as it was, on being trustworthy, quiet, and invisible. Amara had just shattered all of that. The journal described Monet's specific technique during the water lily period, details that contradicted several aspects of this painting's execution. A younger Asian man in a museum staff badge pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. Marcus Chen, a junior curator at a smaller Manhattan gallery, looked up with wide eyes. The journal exists. The girl is quoting it accurately. The room erupted in chaos. Marcus Chen tried to speak up, holding his phone with the research that confirmed Amara's claims, but he was too junior, too insignificant to challenge someone of Dr. Vandermeer's stature. Victoria Ashford, Thornwell's business partner, a striking woman with sharp features and calculating eyes, watched from near the painting with unusual intensity. She seemed nervous, her gaze darting between Thornwell and Dr. Vandermeer. The security guards reached Amara and Claudia, grabbing them roughly by their arms. Claudia flinched but didn't resist, her survival instincts kicking in. Don't fight back. Don't give them a reason to hurt you. Don't make it worse. But as they were physically hauled toward the exit, Amara tried one more time to make them understand. She spoke in German, her voice rising desperately over the noise. The paint chemical composition is wrong for the time period. Titanium white wasn't commercially available until 1919, but this painting is supposedly from 1922, and Monet died in 1926. And the specific shade of titanium white in this painting matches modern formulations, not early 20th century versions. She was being dragged across the marble floor now, her feet barely touching the ground, but she shouted over her shoulder, "I've researched your collection, Mr. Thornwell. I've looked at photographs online of at least 3 other paintings you own. They all have similar problems: anachronistic materials, wrong techniques, questionable provenance." Richard Thornwell froze. For just 1 second, his confident facade cracked, and something like fear flashed across his face. Victoria Ashford went visibly pale, her hand reaching out to steady herself against a nearby table. "Doctor?" Vandermeer moved quickly to Thornwell's side, speaking in low, urgent tones, but her eyes kept cutting back to Amara with unmistakable alarm. The guests watched with satisfaction as the troublemaker and her mother were removed. This was the natural order reasserting itself. People like that didn't belong here, didn't have the right to question their betters. Victoria Ashford's voice cut through the murmuring crowd, too loud, too forceful. "Everyone, please, let's forget this ridiculous disruption. A delusional child, nothing more. Let's continue celebrating this magnificent acquisition." But Marcus Chen had his phone out, filming before another security guard could stop him. He captured Thornwell's moment of fear, Victoria's pallor, Dr. Vandermeer's alarm. The door slammed behind Amara and Claudia as they were thrown out onto the street. Rain had started falling, cold November rain that soaked through their clothes within seconds. Claudia stood on the sidewalk outside the mansion, shaking, tears mixing with rain on her face. Amara had never seen her mother cry before. Their apartment in the Bronx had never felt smaller or more suffocating. Claudia sat at their tiny kitchen table, her serving uniform still damp from the rain, her face buried in her hands as sobs racked her body. 15 years. 15 years of perfect service, of swallowing her pride, of accepting casual disrespect and worse, all destroyed in a single night. Amara stood frozen in the doorway, guilt crushing her chest. She wanted to explain, to make her mother understand that she was right, that the painting was fake, that exposing the truth mattered. But watching her mother break down, she wasn't sure anymore. When Claudia finally looked up, her eyes were red and swollen, and her voice came out rough and angry. "You had to be smart? You had to show off? We're not them, Amara. We'll never be them. And now, because you couldn't keep quiet, we have nothing." Amara tried to apologize, but Claudia cut her off. "Do you know what you've done? Do you understand? Those people control everything in this city. One word from Richard Thornwell, and no one will hire me. No one." Sleep came fitfully that night, and the morning proved Claudia right in the worst possible way. Her phone started ringing at 7 in the morning and didn't stop. Every family she worked for, every client she had built relationships with over years of faithful service, called to cancel. Mrs. Agnews Tapentu Macy, of the Ray. Patterson from the Upper West Side spoke with icy politeness. "I can't have someone in my home who causes trouble, Claudia. Surely you understand. The Goldsteins were more direct. Your daughter disrespected Mr. Thornwell. Everyone's talking about it. We can't be associated with that. The Johnsons, the Wangs, the Rosenberg family, all the same message delivered with varying degrees of false sympathy. But Mrs. Chen from Park Avenue was honest in a way that made it worse. Richard Thornwell called me personally, Claudia. He made it very clear that anyone who employs you will be shut out of certain social and business circles. I'm sorry. I have children to think about, business connections to maintain. I can't afford to cross him." By noon, Claudia had lost every single client. 15 years of work relationships, gone in hours. The racist undertones weren't even subtle. Several clients expressed relief, finally having an excuse to fire the black woman who had perhaps gotten a bit too comfortable, whose daughter clearly didn't understand her place. That afternoon, a certified letter arrived. The landlord was raising their rent by $800 a month, effective immediately. The timing couldn't be coincidental. With no income and no prospects, they had maybe 3 weeks before they'd be on the street. Amara watched her mother age a decade in a single day. The vibrant woman who had raised her, who had worked herself to exhaustion to provide opportunities, collapsed inward. Claudia moved through the apartment like a ghost, mechanically packing her work supplies, folding uniforms she'd never wear again. She wouldn't look at Amara, wouldn't speak to her beyond necessary words. The silence felt like punishment worse than any screaming could have been. That evening, as Amara sat on their worn couch trying to comprehend the magnitude of what her words had cost, someone knocked on their door. Claudia answered it warily, and Marcus Chen stood there, looking nervous and guilty, glancing over his shoulder like he expected to be followed. He carried a laptop bag and spoke in hushed, urgent tones. "Can I come in? I need to show you something." Inside, Marcus set up his laptop on their small kitchen table and showed them what he had been working on for the past 24 hours. He had barely slept, driven by the same conviction that had made Amara speak up. "The Monet is definitely fake. I had a friend who works in art conservation analyze high-resolution photographs of the painting. The paint composition is wrong, exactly like Amara said. But it's not just that one painting." Marcus pulled up files showing Thornwell's entire collection, cross-referencing acquisition dates, authentication records, and technical analyses where available. At least 5 paintings in Thornwell's collection, worth over $60 million total, showed similar red flags: questionable provenance, gaps in ownership history, and every single one had been authenticated by Dr. Helena Vandermeer. More damning still, Victoria Ashford's art consultancy firm had brokered every single purchase. Marcus had spent hours hacking into auction house databases, technically illegal, but he was past caring about his own career at this point. He showed them a pattern. Paintings would appear from supposedly private European collections, get authenticated by Dr. Commonplace. Vandermeer purchased through Victoria Ashford's consultancy and end up in Thornwell's collection or others like it. The prices were astronomical, the provenance just believable enough to pass initial scrutiny, but under close examination, none of it held up. "This isn't bad luck or honest mistakes," Marcus said, his voice tight with anger. "Someone is running a systematic forgery operation. These are coordinated crimes involving multiple people at the highest levels of the art world." Then Marcus showed them something that made Amara's blood run cold. He had found the name Leonard Price, buried in gallery records from 3 years ago, a talented but unknown artist whose work had appeared in a few small shows. Marcus had tracked down newspaper articles about Price's death 6 months earlier. Apparent suicide, financial problems, depression. The obituary mentioned he left behind a teenage daughter. "Something feels wrong about this," Marcus said. "I can't prove anything yet, but artists don't usually commit suicide right after creating what would be their most commercially successful work." Amara understood immediately. "You think he's the forger. You think whoever is behind this used him, and then—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus nodded grimly. He had a contact in the NYPD, someone who owed him a favor from a previous authentication case that had helped solve a robbery. That contact had let Marcus access Leonard Price's case file, bending rules that could cost them both. Price's apartment had been found full of art supplies, high-quality materials that matched the forgery's composition. His journal, kept as evidence, contained desperate entries spanning 2 years. The entries started hopefully: a commission, well paid, just reproduction work for private collectors. Nothing illegal, just copying masterpieces for people who wanted affordable versions. But the tone shifted dramatically 6 months in. "They want me to age the paintings, to make them look antique. They're creating false provenance documents. I asked to stop, and they threatened me. They said they'd hurt Maya if I refused. They said they'd frame me for crimes I didn't commit. I have no choice." The final entry, dated 1 day before his death, was brief and chilling. "I can't do this anymore. But I can't escape them either. They'll never let me go. They'll never let Maya go. I'm sorry, Maya. I couldn't protect you." Marcus looked at both of them with fear evident in his eyes. This isn't just fraud. If Price didn't commit suicide, if they killed him to keep him quiet, we're in serious danger. Amara felt the weight of what they had stumbled into. This wasn't just about art or about being right. People had died, and now they were targets. As if to confirm their fears, Marcus's phone buzzed. An unknown number had sent a text message: "Stop digging or face consequences. You've been warned." Outside their window, Amara spotted a black sedan parked across the street, a man inside with a camera pointed at their building. They were being watched. Over the next 2 days, Amara and Marcus worked in secret, meeting at the public library where they could use computers without being tracked directly to their homes. Claudia had forbidden Amara from getting more involved, but for the first time in her life, Amara disobeyed her mother. This was bigger than their personal situation now. If Leonard Price had been murdered, if there was a criminal conspiracy at the highest levels of the art world, staying silent would mean letting them win. They analyzed every painting in Thornwell's collection that Dr. Vandermeer had authenticated, looking for patterns in the forgeries. Amara's linguistic skills proved crucial. She translated French auction documents, Italian gallery records, German exhibition histories, finding inconsistencies and fabrications that English-speaking investigators might miss. One French document, supposedly from a 1940 gallery, showed a stamp that didn't match the typography used in that era. An Italian provenance letter referenced a street address in Florence that hadn't existed until 1968. Every document trail led back to Victoria Ashford's consultancy firm. Marcus managed to access auction house financial records through methods he refused to explain, finding millions of dollars flowing through shell companies with Victoria's name attached. The paintings were purchased for enormous sums, used as collateral for even larger loans, and insured for amounts that dwarfed their actual value. It was a classic fraud scheme amplified to absurd scales. But they needed proof that would hold up in court, evidence linking the conspirators directly to the forgeries and to Leonard Price. That meant finding Price's daughter. Amara spent hours on social media, searching for any trace of Maya Price. She finally found her through a memorial page for Leonard, where Maya had posted a brief comment under an obvious pseudonym. But the language in that comment, the specific way she phrased her grief, matched other posts Amara found across different platforms. She was able to piece together that Maya Price, now 18 years old, was working at a diner in Queens under a different name, having dropped out of college after her father's death. Amara sent a carefully worded message through a secure platform, explaining who she was and what they had discovered. She included enough specific details about the forgeries that Maya would know this wasn't a trap. Maya's response came 3 hours later, terse and frightened. "Morningside Diner, Queens. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone. I'll know if you're followed." Amara couldn't go alone, and she convinced Maya to let Marcus come as well, as protection and as a witness. They took a complex route involving 3 subway transfers and a bus to make sure they weren't followed, though Amara spotted the black sedan twice before they managed to lose it. The Morningside Diner was a small, worn establishment with cracked vinyl booths and a laminated menu that had probably been unchanged since the 1980s. Maya Price sat in the back corner booth, positioned where she could see both the entrance and the rear exit. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and a wary tension in her posture that spoke of months spent looking over her shoulder. She was beautiful despite the exhaustion, with her father's artistic features and eyes that held too much pain for 18 years. They sat across from her, and for a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Maya said quietly, "My father didn't commit suicide. They murdered him, and they'll murder me too if they find out I'm talking to you." Her story came out in stops and starts, years of terror and grief compressing into 30 minutes of whispered confession. 2 years ago, Victoria Ashford had approached Leonard Price at a small gallery showing. She had praised his technical skill, his ability to capture the essence of the Impressionist masters. She offered him a commission, supposedly for a wealthy collector who wanted high-quality reproductions for his home. The money was good, desperately needed. Maya had been diagnosed with a chronic illness that required expensive treatment, not fully covered by insurance. Leonard had taken the job to save his daughter. At first, it seemed legitimate. Paint copies of famous works, get paid well, no questions asked. But after the first few paintings, Victoria's demands changed. She wanted the paintings aged artificially, treated to look centuries old. She wanted them painted on antique canvases she provided. and she started bringing forged provenance documents for Leonard to photograph his paintings with, creating false histories. When Leonard realized what he was actually doing, when he understood these weren't going to private collectors but were being sold as genuine masterpieces for millions of dollars, he tried to quit. That's when the threats started. Victoria made it clear that Leonard was already complicit. If he went to the police, she'd ensure he took the fall for everything. She had documentation showing he had willingly participated. She had connections that would make sure he spent decades in prison. And most effectively, she knew where Maya went to school, what route she took home, what times she was vulnerable. "They threatened your life?" Marcus asked, and Maya nodded, not directly. "They were too smart for that. But my father would find photographs of me slipped under his door, pictures taken from across the street, through windows, following me." The message was clear. Over the next 18 months, Leonard created at least 15 forgeries. Monet, Renoir, Degas, Cézanne, all Impressionist masters whose work commanded astronomical prices. Victoria and Dr. Vandermeer handled the aging process, the authentication, the creation of elaborate provenance stories. Thornwell was the primary buyer, but there were others, wealthy collectors around the world. "My father was documenting everything," Maya said. "He knew he might not survive this, so he started keeping records. Photos of the forgery process, audio recordings of Victoria giving instructions, emails detailing payments and authentication schedules, financial documents showing money flowing between shell companies. He hid it all on USB drives in a safe deposit box and gave me the key." The night he died, Maya had been at a late study session at her college library. She came home around 11 p.m. to find police cars and an ambulance outside their house. Her father was dead, hanging in the garage. The police ruled it suicide quickly, noting Leonard's financial problems and the anti-anxiety medications found in his system. But Maya knew it was wrong. Her father was left-handed, but the knot on the noose was tied right-handed. He had made plans for the following week, bought groceries that morning for dinners he was planning to cook. And most damning, he had left her a voicemail earlier that day, saying he loved her and that he had finally figured out a way to fix everything. That's not a man planning suicide. That's a man who was about to go to the authorities. The police didn't investigate thoroughly because wealthy people applied pressure. Victoria Ashford had connections in the NYPD. Someone made sure the case was closed quickly and quietly. Maya produced her phone and showed them photographs of documents she had retrieved from the safe deposit box. One image showed Victoria Ashford and Dr. Helena Vandermeer standing in what looked like a warehouse, surrounded by dozens of paintings in various states of artificial aging. Another showed Richard Thornwell examining a painting, his signature clearly visible on purchase documents laid out on the table beside him. Financial records showed payments totaling over $90 million flowing through the conspiracy. Marcus nearly dropped his coffee. This is enough to send them all to prison for decades. Art fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, tax evasion, and if we can prove they murdered your father, that's life sentences. But Maya's face was full of fear, not triumph. "They killed my father. They have connections everywhere. Money, power, lawyers. Who's going to believe a working-class girl against billionaires and respected experts? Who's going to protect me if I testify? The justice system doesn't work for people like us. You know that." Amara reached across the table and took Maya's hand. "We'll find a way. We'll expose them in a way they can't silence. We'll make sure you're protected and your father gets justice. He was a victim, not a criminal. Everyone needs to know that." Maya looked at this 12-year-old girl with a mix of admiration and sadness. "You still believe the truth matters? That speaking up changes anything?" Amara thought of her mother, broken and unemployed because Amara had dared to speak. She thought of Leonard Price, murdered for trying to escape. She thought of how the system was designed to protect people like Thornwell and destroy people like them. "Yes," she said firmly, "I have to believe that. Because if I don't, then they've already won." As they left the diner, taking different routes again to avoid being followed, Amara noticed the black sedan was back, parked 3 blocks away but clearly watching. They were running out of time. 3 days later, Amara returned to their apartment to find her mother sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cashier's check. $50,000, made out to Claudia Bennett. Next to it lay an unsigned letter on expensive stationery, offering Claudia a full-time position as a private household manager for a wealthy family relocating from overseas. The salary was 3 times what she had been making. All she had to do was sign a non-disclosure agreement promising never to speak about the incident at the Thornwell estate, never to pursue any claims or complaints, and to ensure her daughter did the same. Claudia looked up at Amara with desperate hope in her eyes. "This solves everything. We can pay rent, I can work again, you can go back to school without this hanging over us. We just have to sign and move on." Amara felt ice in her stomach. "This is a bribe, Mama. They're trying to silence us." Claudia's face hardened. "I don't care what it is. It's survival. Principals don't pay rent, Amara. Principals don't put food on the table. I've been invisible my whole life, swallowed every bit of disrespect and worse, so you could have opportunities I never had. And you threw it away to be right about some painting. Well, now we have a chance to fix it. We're signing." Before Amara could argue further, someone pounded on the door with aggressive authority that made them both jump. Claudia opened it to find Dr. Helena Vandermeer standing there with 2 NYPD officers, both white, both middle-aged, both looking at Claudia and Amara with the kind of suspicion that made Amara's pulse spike with fear. Dr. Vandermeer's face was a mask of righteous indignation and wounded dignity. "These officers are here because I'm pressing charges against your daughter for cyber harassment and defamation. Amara has been sending me threatening emails, making false accusations, attempting to destroy my reputation." The officers stepped forward. One of them, Detective Morrison, with graying hair and cold eyes, pulled out a tablet showing alleged emails from an anonymous account. The emails contained specific threats and wild accusations about Dr. Vandermeer's authentication work. "Your daughter has been stalking me for weeks," Dr. Vandermeer said, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "Making these insane claims online, contacting my professional associates with lies, damaging my career that I've spent 50 years building. This is serious criminal behavior. We could arrest her right now. Juvenile detention, a criminal record." Claudia looked at the emails with mounting horror. "Amara, what did you do?" "I didn't send those," Amara said immediately. "I've never emailed her." "This is fabricated." Detective Morrison gave her a skeptical look. "The emails came from an account that accessed public Wi-Fi networks near your school. The language matches the accusations you made at the Thornwell gala. You have motive and opportunity." But Amara was thinking fast. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking, and opened the voice recording app. She had started recording everything after Marcus received his threatening text. "Please, Dr. Vandermeer, can you explain your authentication process? What specific tests did you run on Mr. Pass's process? Thornwell's Monet to verify its age?" Vandermeer, confident in her position and dismissive of a child's questions, answered in detail, perhaps thinking it would make her look more credible to the officers. She described testing procedures, referenced specific scientific methods, and then, trying to demonstrate her expertise, began explaining why the accusations were nonsense. That child claimed the paint composition was wrong, but Leonard Price was a master craftsman. He knew exactly which materials to use. Amara's heart hammered. Leonard Price? The supposed master forger? How did you know his name? His connection to the paintings was never made public. The officers looked confused. Detective Morrison frowned at Vandermeer. "Ma'am, how did you know that name?" Vandermeer's face went pale as she realized her mistake. She had just revealed knowledge that she shouldn't have unless she was involved. I read about him in reports. The investigation." She was floundering now. He was. There were rumors. Amara pressed further, her phone still recording. "And you just said he was paid well for his work before his unfortunate death. But officially, there's no evidence he created forgeries. The NYPD ruled his death a suicide with no connection to art fraud. So how do you know he was paid? How do you know about his work?" Vandermeer lunged for Amara's phone, trying to grab it. The officers instinctively stepped between them, suddenly uncertain about who the real criminal was in this situation. Amara had already backed up the recording to cloud storage, her hands moving quickly across her phone. Dr. Vandermeer, breathing hard, straightened her designer suit and tried to regain composure. "That recording is illegal. Whatever that girl thinks she caught, it won't hold up in any court." And she pointed a shaking finger at Amara. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. These people will destroy you. They have already destroyed you. You're just too stupid to realize it." The officers escorted everyone outside to continue the discussion on neutral ground, but the dynamics had shifted. Detective Morrison was now looking at Vandermeer with suspicion rather than deference. After they left, Claudia sat down heavily, her hands shaking. "They're going to kill us. People with that much power, that much money. They don't let people like us win." Marcus texted Amara minutes later. His apartment had been broken into, nothing taken except his laptop and all the physical research materials. They knew exactly what to take, which meant they had been watching him closely enough to know what evidence he'd gathered. The threat was escalating from intimidation to violence. They were running out of time and options. That night, lying awake in the dark, Amara made a decision. They couldn't fight this alone. They needed someone with power, with resources, with the ability to protect them. They needed someone who couldn't be bought or intimidated. She thought of Sophia Laurent, an investigative journalist whose work she had followed obsessively. Laurent specialized in exposing white-collar crime, particularly corruption in the art world. She had brought down auction house executives, exposed money laundering schemes, and revealed fraud at prestigious museums. If anyone could help them, it was Laurent. Using a secure email account set up through multiple proxies, Amara sent Laurent everything: the recordings, the documents Marcus had gathered, the information about Maya Price and her father's murder, the financial records showing the scope of the fraud. She included her own observations about the paintings, her linguistic analysis of the forged provenance documents, everything. Then she waited, knowing that this was either their salvation or their final mistake. 2 hours later, her phone rang from an unknown number. A woman's voice, crisp and professional, asked, "Is this Amara Bennett?" Laurent had gotten the message. Sophia Laurent turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her early 50s, with silver-streaked black hair, and an intensity that reminded Amara of a predator. They met in Laurent's office at a major newspaper, surrounded by stacks of files and computers displaying complex financial charts. Laurent had been tracking suspicious art sales for 2 years, trying to pin down evidence of systematic fraud. "You gave me the missing pieces," Laurent told them, her eyes bright with the thrill of a story coming together. "I knew something was wrong with Thornwell's collection. I knew Vandermeer's authentication record was too perfect. But I couldn't prove the connection. You handed me a criminal conspiracy on a silver platter." But Laurent was also brutally honest about the danger. These people have lawyers who can tie up investigations for years. They have connections in law enforcement, politics, media. Going public will put all of you at risk. They'll retaliate. Maya Price needs to be willing to testify, and she needs protection. That's why Amara had also contacted the FBI art crime team through Laurent's connections. Special Agent Sofia Rodriguez, a no-nonsense woman with 20 years of experience investigating art fraud, reviewed their evidence with the kind of careful attention that gave Amara hope. "This is substantial," Rodriguez said after hours of examination. "Multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, possibly murder. But building a prosecutable case takes time. We need to secure the physical evidence Maya Price has. We need to get official authentication tests done on the paintings. We need to follow the money trail through shell companies. This could take months." "We don't have months," Marcus said. "They've already broken into my apartment, threatened us, tried to have Amara arrested on false charges. They're escalating." Rodriguez made a decision. "We move fast. We coordinate with Sophia's publication. We get everything lined up, and then we hit them all at once before they can scatter or destroy evidence. But you all need to be very careful for the next few days." Laurent contacted Maya directly, convincing her to turn over the USB drives to FBI custody in exchange for witness protection. Maya was terrified but agreed when Rodriguez personally guaranteed her safety. The drives contained everything Leonard Price had documented: Detailed photographs of him creating each forgery with Victoria Ashford supervising. Audio recordings of conversations where Thornwell and Vandermeer discussed which paintings to target. Financial spreadsheets showing the flow of millions of dollars. Emails arranging authentications and fabricating provenance documents. One photograph was particularly damning. Victoria Ashford and Dr. Vandermeer standing in a warehouse surrounded by dozens of paintings in various stages of artificial aging, chemicals, and aging equipment visible in the background. Another showed Thornwell examining a forgery with obvious knowledge that it was fake, his handwritten notes on the painting's planned provenance visible in the image. The financial records revealed the full scope. $92 million in fraudulent art sales over 3 years. The paintings were purchased for inflated prices, immediately insured for even higher amounts, used as collateral for massive loans that were then defaulted on, generating insurance payouts and tax write-offs, while the actual forgeries were sold to other wealthy collectors who knew or suspected they were fake, but participated anyway for their own financial schemes. It was a nested series of frauds involving dozens of wealthy collectors and several major auction houses. But Maya revealed one more crucial piece. Her father had left a video message hidden on a final USB drive that she had kept separately. He had recorded it 3 days before his death, a message for Maya to find if anything happened to him. Watching the video broke Amara's heart. Leonard Price looked exhausted and frightened but determined. He explained everything, named everyone involved, and then said something that changed the entire meaning of his work. I left mistakes in every painting, deliberate imperfections that a true expert would catch, but that greedy people would overlook. I was creating a breadcrumb trail for someone with a pure eye, someone who loves art for art's sake rather than for profit. Someone who sees with clear eyes, uncorrupted by money and power. If you're watching this, you found what I left. You're the person I hoped would come. He had been building a case all along, hoping that eventually someone would notice and investigate. Amara realized with stunning clarity that she had been exactly the person Leonard Price had hoped for. An outsider, with no stake in protecting the art world's reputation. Someone who looked at paintings with genuine love and knowledge rather than dollar signs. Over the next 48 hours, Laurent and Rodriguez coordinated their attack. Laurent wrote a comprehensive exposé documenting every aspect of the fraud, backing it with irrefutable evidence. Rodriguez prepared arrest warrants and coordinated with federal prosecutors. Marcus verified the authentication issues with multiple independent experts. But Thornwell and his associates weren't idle. Claudia received a visit from an expensive lawyer offering an even larger settlement, $500,000, if they would leave New York permanently and sign away any right to speak about the case. When Claudia refused, citing the FBI's involvement, the threats became explicit. Your daughter could have an accident. Bronx is a dangerous place. Things happen. Amara went to school one day to find security guards following her, men in suits who made no secret of their surveillance. Marcus received messages from former colleagues warning him that Thornwell had hired investigators to dig up anything that could be used to discredit him. Maya, in FBI protection, reported that someone had tried to access her witness protection location, setting off alarms and requiring her to be relocated. They were getting desperate, which made them more dangerous. Rodriguez moved up the timeline. We go tomorrow night. Everything happens at once. Public exposure and arrests simultaneously before they can coordinate a defense or flee the country. Laurent's article was scheduled to go live at exactly 8 p.m. the following evening. The FBI would execute arrest warrants at the same time. But there was one final twist that nobody anticipated. Thornwell, sensing the walls closing in, decided to make one last play. He scheduled an emergency gala, a show of force and confidence, inviting every wealthy collector and art world figure in New York. The message was clear. We are untouchable. We are in control. This will all go away. He planned to announce new acquisitions, demonstrate Dr. Vandermeer's continued support, and present a united front. Victoria Ashford would be there, along with dozens of complicit collectors and compromised experts. It was perfect. Every criminal in the conspiracy gathered in one place, completely confident they had won. Rodriguez saw the opportunity immediately. "We arrest them there, in front of everyone. Let the entire art world see their empire collapse in real time." Laurent would be present as press, ready to capture everything. The stage was set for either justice or disaster. The night of Thornwell's emergency gala, Amara watched from Marcus's apartment as news coverage showed wealthy guests arriving at the estate. The same ballroom where she had been humiliated and thrown out was now filled with the art world's elite, all there to demonstrate their loyalty to Thornwell and their contempt for anyone who dared question their world. Claudia sat in a holding cell, arrested hours earlier in a coordinated move that nobody had seen coming. Police had raided their apartment just after dawn, a SWAT-style operation completely disproportionate to the alleged crime. They found Leonard Price's art supplies and materials planted in the back of Claudia's closet. They found stolen auction documents and forged provenance papers hidden under her mattress. They found correspondence allegedly between Claudia and European forgers discussing the creation and sale of fake masterpieces. All of it planted, all of it fabricated, but convincing enough for an arrest warrant. The narrative Thornwell's lawyers pushed to the media was devastating in its simplicity and racist appeal. Claudia Bennett, a Bronx maid, had spent years stealing from the wealthy families she worked for. She had enlisted Leonard Price to create forgeries, replacing real paintings with fakes and selling the originals on the black market. When her scheme was exposed by vigilant collector Richard Thornwell, she had tried to frame him and respected experts to cover her crimes. Her daughter Amara had been trained to help, using her linguistic skills to forge provenance documents and her knowledge of art to make the forgeries convincing. 3 paintings had been reported stolen from a prestigious Manhattan gallery that same night, and pieces of the security system had been found in Claudia's apartment. The media coverage was immediate and vicious. Headlines screamed about the maid who betrayed her employer's trust. Cable news showed footage of Claudia being led away in handcuffs, her face exhausted and defeated. Commentators speculated about how long she had been stealing, how many families had been victimized, whether this was part of a larger criminal network targeting wealthy New Yorkers. The racist undertones were barely concealed. This is why you can't trust certain people in your homes. They see all that wealth, and they can't help themselves. Probably been stealing for years, we just didn't notice. Comment sections were even worse, filled with slurs and calls for maximum prosecution. Amara sat frozen, watching her mother destroyed on television. Neighbors had filmed the arrest, capturing Claudia's confusion and fear. The building superintendent told reporters he had always suspected something, noting how Claudia sometimes came home late carrying large packages. The fact that those packages were usually groceries or thrift store clothes didn't matter now. Detective Morrison gave a press conference praising the investigation, claiming they had been tracking this criminal operation for months. Dr. Vandermeer appeared on news programs, tearful and vindicated, explaining how she had been viciously targeted by people who resented her success. Victoria Ashford called for Claudia to face the maximum possible sentence, positioning herself as a victim of fraud. Thornwell played his role perfectly, the magnanimous billionaire who had been betrayed by someone he trusted. "I believed in giving people opportunities," he told cameras with practiced sadness. "I employed Miss Bennett despite her lack of credentials because I believed in second chances, and she repaid that kindness with theft and deception. It's heartbreaking." Public opinion turned with vicious speed. Even people who had initially questioned the Thornwell painting now accepted that Amara and Claudia were criminals. After all, why would a respected billionaire and a renowned expert lie? Why would they go to such lengths unless they were protecting themselves from real criminals? The few voices questioning the narrative were drowned out by the overwhelming consensus that justice was being served. Marcus had been fired from his museum that morning, his reputation destroyed by association. Maya, in witness protection, sent messages saying she was going completely underground, too terrified to surface even for the FBI. Everything was falling apart. Amara was alone in Marcus's apartment, her mother in jail, watching their lives dismantled piece by piece. But she had known this might happen. She had prepared for it. 2 weeks earlier, after recording Dr. Vandermeer's slip, Amara had contacted Sophia Laurent. She had sent Laurent everything they had discovered: the evidence about Leonard Price, Maya's testimony, the financial records Marcus had compiled, the technical analysis of the forgeries, the recordings, all of it. Laurent had been quietly building her case while publicly staying silent, letting Thornwell and his conspirators think they were safe. Laurent had connections at the FBI art crime team that went back years. Special Agent Rodriguez had been tracking Thornwell independently, suspecting his art collection was being used for money laundering but lacking concrete proof. Amara's evidence had given Rodriguez everything she needed to build a federal case. For 2 weeks, while Thornwell grew confident and Amara's family was being destroyed, federal investigators had been working in secret. They had verified Maya's evidence, traced financial transactions through shell companies, interviewed witnesses, and built an airtight prosecution. They had also been tracking Victoria Ashford's communications, intercepting her orders to plant evidence and frame Claudia. They had recorded Thornwell's conversations with his lawyers discussing how to silence the Bennett family permanently. Now, with the conspirators gathered at the gala, confident in their victory, Rodriguez was ready to move. Amara's phone rang. It was Laurent. They're about to make arrests. Turn on the news. Every major network had coverage of Thornwell's gala, treating it as a major social event. Cameras showed the glittering ballroom, wealthy guests in designer clothes, Dr. Vandermeer giving a speech about integrity and the importance of trusting established experts. Victoria Ashford stood beside Thornwell, looking triumphant. They believed they had won completely. Then federal agents entered the ballroom. The live coverage captured everything as Special Agent Rodriguez and a team of FBI agents walked through the crowd, arrest warrants in hand. Simultaneously, Laurent's exposé went live on the newspaper's website and began trending across social media. The article was comprehensive and devastating, laying out the entire conspiracy with irrefutable evidence. Within minutes, the story exploded. Thornwell's face went from smug confidence to pure panic as Rodriguez approached him. The charges she read were extensive: fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, tax evasion, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, evidence tampering. Dr. Vandermeer tried to flee, pushing through the crowd toward a side exit, but agents were waiting there. She was tackled in her designer gown, cameras capturing her arrest as she screamed about injustice and persecution. Guests scattered in chaos, everyone desperate to distance themselves from the unfolding disaster. But Victoria Ashford wasn't there. In the confusion, she had slipped out a service entrance. Amara's phone rang again, but it wasn't Laurent or Rodriguez. It was Marcus, his voice tight with fear. "Ashford knows where I live. She's coming for you. Get out now." Before Amara could move, his apartment door burst open. Victoria Ashford stood there, no longer polished and professional but disheveled and desperate, holding a small pistol that shook in her hand. "You ruined everything," she said, her voice breaking. "Everything I built, everything I fought for, destroyed by a child." She grabbed Amara by the arm, the gun pressed against her side, and forced her toward the door. Marcus, who had been on his way back to the apartment, arrived just as they were leaving. Ashford fired a warning shot that missed him by inches, sending him scrambling for cover as she dragged Amara down the stairs. In minutes, they were in Ashford's car, speeding erratically through Manhattan streets toward the Thornwell estate. Ashford was unraveling, ranting as she drove. "I came from nothing, just like you. Do you understand that? I clawed my way up from poverty. But they never accept you, never truly let you in. I had to take what was mine. I had to become them to survive." Amara, terrified but forcing herself to think clearly, realized something important. Victoria Ashford was a woman of color, mixed race, someone who could pass as white in certain circles but had clearly faced discrimination and rejection. She had internalized that racism, adopted the values of the people who excluded her, and became part of the system that oppressed people like her. It was a tragedy, but it didn't excuse what she had done. "They would have thrown me away eventually," Ashford continued, "just like they throw away all of us who aren't born into their world. So yes, I created my own wealth. I used their system against them, and it worked until you came along." Amara spoke carefully, trying to buy time. "But you became just like them. You hurt people. You helped them hurt Leonard Price. You're hurting his daughter. You're hurting my mother." Ashford laughed bitterly. "You think exposing them changes anything? They'll replace Thornwell with another billionaire. The system continues. Nothing really changes for people like us. That's the truth you haven't learned yet." They arrived at the Thornwell estate. Police had mostly left after the arrests, leaving only crime scene tape and a few security guards who fled when they saw Ashford's gun. She forced Amara into the gallery where the fake Monet still hung, now marked as evidence. Ashford's plan was desperate and improvised. She was going to destroy all the remaining evidence, burn the estate down, and use Amara as a hostage to negotiate immunity and escape. But Amara had noticed something crucial. The estate's security cameras were still active, uploading footage to cloud storage. Every word Ashford had said in the car and in the gallery was being recorded. Amara spoke clearly and deliberately, describing everything Ashford was doing, confessing to, planning. She switched between English, French, Italian, and German, ensuring that even if Ashford destroyed the physical recordings, there would be multiple linguistic transcripts available. Ashford realized too late what Amara was doing. She lunged for the visible cameras, trying to smash them, but the footage was already uploaded and backed up. She had just confessed to everything on federal security recordings. Police arrived, alerted by Marcus, who had called 911. Rodriguez was with them, having left the gala arrests to other agents. A tense standoff followed, Ashford holding the gun to Amara's head, demanding immunity and safe passage out of the country. Rodriguez talked her down with patient professionalism, explaining that the evidence against her was overwhelming, that adding kidnapping and attempted murder would only make things worse, that she still had a chance to cooperate and reduce her sentence. Amara, her voice steady despite her fear, spoke directly to Ashford. "Leonard Price tried to do the right thing, and you killed him. Don't make it worse. Please." Something broke in Victoria Ashford. The gun fell from her shaking hands. She collapsed to her knees, and agents immediately moved in to arrest her. Amara was safe, shaking but unharmed. 1 week later, the aftermath continued to unfold in ways that exceeded even Sophia Laurent's expectations. Federal investigators had uncovered not just the conspiracy involving Thornwell, Vandermeer, and Ashford, but a much larger network of art fraud spanning decades and multiple continents. The investigation revealed 42 additional forgeries in museums and private collections worldwide, all authenticated by supposedly reputable experts who were either complicit or incompetent. The total estimated fraud exceeded $350 million. Richard Thornwell faced 35 years in federal prison on multiple counts, including fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, tax evasion, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. His legal team tried every tactic, but the evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Helena Vandermeer's entire 50-year career was being reviewed by an international task force. Hundreds of paintings she had authenticated over decades were now being re-examined. Early findings suggested that at least 60 of her authentications were questionable and dozens were confirmed forgeries. Her reputation, once unassailable, was utterly destroyed. She faced criminal charges in multiple jurisdictions and civil lawsuits from museums and collectors whose acquisitions she had fraudulently authenticated. Victoria Ashford, charged with fraud, conspiracy, kidnapping, attempted murder, and as a potential accessory to Leonard Price's death, faced life in prison. She had agreed to cooperate with investigators, providing detailed testimony about the conspiracy in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her confession revealed that Leonard Price had indeed been murdered, killed by a hired professional when he threatened to expose the entire operation. That confession led to additional charges and arrests. The scope of the corruption shocked the art world. Multiple auction houses had executives implicated in various schemes. Several prominent collectors had knowingly purchased forgeries, using them for insurance fraud and tax evasion. The scandal exposed systemic vulnerabilities in art authentication and provenance verification, forcing the entire industry to confront its failures. Maya Price testified before a grand jury, her father's evidence and her own testimony crucial to securing convictions. Leonard Price was posthumously exonerated, his reputation transformed from suspected forger to tragic victim who had tried to do the right thing. The video message, where he explained leaving deliberate mistakes in the paintings, became public, revealing his hope that someone with pure intentions would eventually notice. That someone had been Amara. Claudia Bennett was released from jail with a formal apology from the district attorney. All charges were dropped, and she filed civil rights lawsuits against the NYPD for the raid and false arrest. The planted evidence was traced back to hired operatives working for Victoria Ashford, leading to additional arrests. Claudia's clients didn't all return, but several offered genuine apologies and rehired her. More importantly, the publicity around the case brought job offers from families who specifically wanted to support her. The media narrative shifted dramatically. Amara became a minor celebrity, the brilliant girl who exposed a massive criminal conspiracy. But the attention made her uncomfortable. She didn't want to be famous. She had just wanted to do what was right. 3 months after the initial arrests, a federal press conference announced the full scope of the investigation. Agent Rodriguez presented findings that revealed art fraud as a much more pervasive problem than previously understood. The FBI was establishing new protocols, working with international agencies to create stronger authentication standards, and pursuing dozens of additional cases inspired by the Thornwell investigation. But the real changes came from an unexpected source. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, one of the institutions that had unknowingly displayed forgeries, invited Amara to give a lecture on authentication and the importance of diverse perspectives in the art world. She stood in the museum's auditorium, facing an audience of hundreds: curators, collectors, students, journalists, and art lovers. Many of them were the same people who had attended Thornwell's gala and watched her be thrown out. But this time, Claudia sat in the front row, dressed in a beautiful outfit that she had purchased with earnings from her new clients, pride radiating from her face. Marcus Chen, reinstated at his museum and promoted to senior curator for his role in exposing the fraud, introduced Amara with genuine warmth. Then Maya Price joined them on stage, having finished her testimony and eager to honor her father's memory. Maya had started college again, her tuition paid by a foundation created specifically to support children of crime victims. Together, Amara and Maya unveiled the final surprise. Maya had brought the last USB drive her father had left, the one containing his final video message. The message played on the large screen for everyone to see. Leonard Price, recorded months before his death, explained his impossible situation and his desperate plan. "But I left mistakes," he said on the video, his voice tired but determined. "Deliberate imperfections in every painting that true experts would notice, but greedy ones would overlook. I was creating a trail for someone pure-hearted, someone who loves art for art's sake, someone who sees with clear eyes, uncorrupted by money or power. If you're watching this, you found what I left. You're the person I hoped would come." His final words were directed at his daughter. "Please tell Maya I'm sorry. Tell her I tried to make it right. Tell her that art should bring beauty into the world, not serve greed. And tell whoever exposes this that they did what I couldn't. They had the courage I lost." "Thank you." The auditorium was silent except for the sound of people crying. Leonard Price's redemption was complete. He hadn't been a willing criminal but a desperate father who had tried, even in his darkest moments, to create a path toward justice. Agent Rodriguez took the stage next, announcing the establishment of the Leonard Price Standard, new authentication protocols requiring independent verification, diverse expert panels, and complete transparency in provenance documentation. These protocols would be implemented internationally, reshaping how art was authenticated and sold. Museums and auction houses that refused to comply would face regulatory consequences and loss of accreditation. The Leonard Price Memorial Foundation, created by Marcus and Maya with support from several museums, would provide scholarships and support for working-class students pursuing careers in art history and conservation. It would also fund research into authentication technology and forensic art analysis. As Amara prepared to speak, she looked out at the audience and felt the weight of everything that had led to this moment. She thought of that night at the Thornwell Gala when speaking the truth had seemed to destroy her family. She thought of her mother's tears and fear. She thought of Leonard Price, desperate and trapped, creating breadcrumbs for someone who might never come. She thought of Maya, living in terror after losing her father. She thought of all the systems designed to keep people like them invisible and powerless. Her speech was shorter than anyone expected, but more powerful for its simplicity. I didn't expose this conspiracy to be special or famous. I did it because it was right. My mother taught me that being invisible doesn't mean being powerless. Sometimes the people nobody sees are the ones who see everything. The art world needs to change, not just its authentication protocols, but its culture. It needs to listen to voices that have been excluded, to value knowledge over wealth, to serve beauty and truth rather than profit. Leonard Price died trying to make that happen. We owe it to him and to everyone else trapped by systems of corruption and greed to build something better. She ended with a challenge to the audience. Look at the art around you with clear eyes. Question what you're told. Don't accept authentication just because it comes from respected sources. Real expertise comes from genuine knowledge and love of art, not from connections or prestige. And if you see something wrong, speak up, even if it costs you, even if it's frightening, because silence protects the powerful and abandons the vulnerable. The standing ovation lasted for several minutes, but Amara felt uncomfortable with the praise. She had done what anyone should do when witnessing injustice. The fact that it was considered heroic said more about how broken the system was than about her personal courage. Weeks after the speech, Amara and Claudia visited a small gallery in Brooklyn, just looking at paintings together without pressure or agenda. They stood in front of a vibrant, abstract piece, discussing color and technique, when a young black girl approached them shyly. "Are you Amara Bennett?" the girl asked, maybe 9 years old with braids and wide, curious eyes. "I want to study art because of you. My teacher showed us the video of your speech." Amara knelt down to the girl's eye level. "Then study it. Learn everything you can. And never let anyone tell you that you don't belong in museums or galleries or anywhere else you want to be." The girl's mother, a Latina woman wearing a housekeeping uniform and tired eyes, thanked them with tears streaming down her face. "You changed things for all of us. My daughter believes she can be anything now." Claudia and the woman exchanged a long look, a mutual understanding of shared struggles and the weight of watching your children face a world designed to diminish them. As Amara and Claudia walked home through Brooklyn streets, light snow beginning to fall in the early December evening, Claudia took her daughter's hand. "You changed things," she said softly. "Not just for us. For all of us. For everyone who's been invisible." Amara squeezed her mother's hand. "We changed things, Mama. Together. We survived because we stayed together." Their modest Bronx apartment looked different now, transformed not by wealth but by hope. On the wall hung Amara's acceptance letter to Columbia University, a full scholarship for their youth art history program starting the following fall. Next to it, a framed newspaper photograph showed Amara speaking at the Metropolitan Museum, her face serious and determined. And beside that hung a small, inexpensive print of a Monet water lily painting, purchased from the museum gift shop for $20. Genuine beauty that cost nothing, available to anyone who wanted to see it. They had survived the attempt to destroy them. They had exposed corruption at the highest levels. They had helped bring justice for Leonard Price and his daughter. But more importantly, they had proven that being invisible didn't mean being powerless, that speaking truth mattered even when it was costly, that the system could be challenged by those it tried to silence. The months following the Metropolitan Museum speech brought continued vindication, but also a return to a kind of normalcy that Amara and Claudia desperately needed. The media attention gradually faded as other stories captured public interest, though the impact of the case continued to ripple through the art world. Claudia rebuilt her career on her own terms, choosing clients who treated her with respect and paid fairly. Several families who had dropped her reached out with genuine apologies, acknowledging how quickly they had believed the worst about her. Some she forgave and returned to work for. Others, whose racism had been too evident, she politely declined. She had learned that she didn't need to accept every job, that her skills and integrity had value, and that she could demand to be treated with dignity. Marcus Chen became one of the youngest senior curators at a major New York museum, tasked with developing new authentication protocols and diversity initiatives in the art world. He hired Maya Price as an assistant curator, mentoring her as she pursued her degree in art history. Together, they created programs bringing art education to underserved communities, determined to open doors that had been closed for too long. Maya thrived in her new role, channeling her grief over her father's death into ensuring his legacy lived on. The Leonard Price Memorial Foundation grew beyond its initial scope, funding not just scholarships, but also research into authentication technology that would make future forgeries harder to create and easier to detect. Maya spoke publicly about her father's story, humanizing him as a victim rather than a criminal, challenging the narrative that had briefly destroyed his reputation. She connected with other families affected by white-collar crime, building a support network for people trapped by powerful criminals who seemed untouchable until they weren't. Dr. Helena Vandermeer faced trial on multiple charges of fraud and was convicted on 17 counts. Her sentencing hearing was attended by representatives from museums and collectors worldwide, all victims of her fraudulent authentications. She received 12 years in federal prison, a shocking fall for someone who had once been considered the world's foremost authority on art authentication. Her conviction sent shockwaves through the industry, prompting reviews of authentication practices globally. Richard Thornwell's trial was even more spectacular, lasting 3 months and featuring testimony from dozens of witnesses. Several families who had dropped her reached out with genuine apologies, acknowledging how quickly they had believed the worst about her. Some she forgave and returned to work for. Others, whose racism had been too evident, she politely declined. She had learned that she didn't need to accept every job, that her skills and integrity had value, and that she could demand to be treated with dignity. Several families who had dropped her reached out with genuine apologies, acknowledging how quickly they had believed the worst about her. Some she forgave and returned to work for. Others, whose racism had been too evident, she politely declined. She had learned that she didn't need to accept every job, that her skills and integrity had value, and that she could demand to be treated with dignity. In some ways, her cooperation brought the most complete justice, ensuring that everyone responsible faced consequences. The broader investigation continued for years, uncovering fraud in auction houses, private galleries, and even some museum acquisitions. The art market underwent significant reforms, implementing the Leonard Price standards and creating independent oversight bodies to verify authentications and provenance. Maya thrived in her new role, channeling her grief over her father's death into ensuring his legacy lived on. The Leonard Price Memorial Foundation grew beyond its initial scope, funding not just scholarships, but also research into authentication technology that would make future forgeries harder to create and easier to detect. Maya spoke publicly about her father's story, humanizing him as a victim rather than a criminal, challenging the narrative that had briefly destroyed his reputation. He was convicted on 32 counts, including fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. The judge, noting his attempts to frame innocent people and destroy evidence, sentenced him to 35 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. His art collection was seized and liquidated, with proceeds going to reimburse defrauded collectors and museums. On graduation day 2 years later, when Amara walked across the stage to receive her degree at just 14 years old, Claudia cried tears of joy. This was what all those years of cleaning houses had been for, all those nights of exhaustion and indignity. Her daughter had not just survived, but flourished, and in doing so had changed an entire industry. Professors who had once seemed unreachable treated her as a colleague, seeking her input on authentication questions and linguistic analysis of provenance documents. She made friends, mostly other scholarship students from working-class backgrounds, who shared her passion for art without the entitlement that came with wealth. Her mother attended every one of her presentations and exhibitions, sitting in the front row with undisguised pride. She published papers on authentication techniques and gave lectures around the world, always emphasizing the importance of diverse perspectives and the dangers of unchecked authority. But perhaps the most important moment came 3 years after the initial exposé, when the Metropolitan Museum hosted a retrospective of Leonard Price's legitimate artwork. The man had been a genuine talent, his original paintings showing remarkable skill and emotional depth. The exhibition, curated by Maya, with assistance from Amara and Marcus, showcased Leonard's work alongside explanations of how he had been exploited by the conspiracy, how he had tried to create a trail of evidence, and how his courage in documenting the crimes had ultimately brought down the entire operation. The opening night drew thousands of visitors, including many who had attended the original Thornwell Gala. The difference in atmosphere was striking. Instead of wealthy people showing off their connections, the crowd included families from all backgrounds, school groups, art students, and community members who had never felt welcome in such spaces before. The museum had made admission free for the entire exhibition run, funded by donations from collectors who wanted to support Leonard's legacy. Amara stood with Claudia, Marcus, and Maya as the exhibition opened, watching people engage with Leonard's art. A video installation showed his final message, the one where he explained leaving deliberate mistakes for someone with clear eyes to find. Visitors listened in silence, many crying, understanding the tragedy and courage of a man trapped by circumstances beyond his control. Maya gave a short speech, her voice steady despite the emotion. "My father made mistakes. He got involved with criminals because he was desperate to save me. But he never stopped trying to do the right thing. He never stopped hoping that someone would see what he had hidden in plain sight. And that person came." She gestured to Amara, standing awkwardly in the spotlight. A 12-year-old girl who loved art enough to speak truth when everyone told her to be silent, who risked everything because she saw what others chose to ignore. My father died believing he had failed. But he didn't fail. He created the possibility for justice, and Amara made it real. The audience applauded, and Amara stepped forward. She spoke briefly, reiterating her belief that the art world needed to continue changing, needed to welcome voices from all backgrounds, needed to value truth over profit. Then she said something that captured the heart of why all of this mattered. Art belongs to everyone. It's not property for the wealthy to hoard and manipulate. It's humanity's shared heritage, meant to inspire and connect us across time and culture. Leonard Price understood that. He loved art purely, and that love is what drove him to leave clues for someone who would love it the same way. We honor him not just by remembering his story, but by building an art world worthy of that pure love. A world where a maid's daughter can walk into a gallery and be valued for what she sees, not dismissed for who she is. That night, as the exhibition continued and visitors explored Leonard's paintings, Amara and Claudia walked through Central Park together. Snow fell gently, coating the trees and paths in white. They talked about ordinary things, plans for the weekend, a movie they wanted to see, Claudia's frustration with a leaky faucet in their apartment. They had learned to treasure these ordinary moments, understanding how fragile peace could be. "Have you thought about what you want to do long-term?" Claudia asked. "You could work anywhere now. Any museum in the world would hire you," Amara considered. "I want to keep doing what we're doing. Making art accessible, helping people see that they belong in these spaces. Training the next generation of curators and authenticators to look with clear eyes." She paused, then added, "And I want to keep working with people like Maya, people who've been hurt by the system. There are probably other Leonard Prices out there, trapped by powerful criminals, too scared to speak up. Maybe we can help them find their voice." Claudia smiled, her face peaceful in the falling snow. "You've already changed the world, baby, but I know you won't stop there. That's just who you are." They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Amara asked, "Do you ever regret letting me speak that night, at the Thornwell Gala? It cost us so much." Claudia stopped walking, turning to face her daughter directly. "Every day, I regret that speaking truth cost us anything. But I never regret that you spoke. You were right, and being right shouldn't come with punishment. The fact that it did shows how broken things were. But we survived. We fought back, and we won. Not just for us, but for everyone like us." So no, I don't regret your courage. I just wish the world was better, so that courage wasn't necessary." They continued their walk, eventually heading home to their small apartment that now felt like a sanctuary rather than a prison. The acceptance letter from Columbia still hung on the wall, joined now by her degree, framed newspaper articles about the case, and photographs from the Leonard Price exhibition. But the most cherished item remained that inexpensive print of Monet's water lilies, a reminder that beauty didn't require wealth or status, only the eyes to see it. As Amara prepared for bed that night, she thought about everything that had happened since that moment when she chose to speak. The fear, the struggle, the danger, the vindication, the change. She thought about Leonard Price leaving clues, hoping someone would notice. She thought about Maya, who had lost her father but gained justice. She thought about Marcus, who had risked his career to stand up for what was right. And she thought about her mother, who had taught her that being invisible didn't mean being powerless. The fight wasn't over. The art world still had problems, still excluded too many people, still valued wealth over knowledge too often. But things were better than they had been. Doors had opened. Voices that had been silenced were now being heard. And maybe, just maybe, that 12-year-old girl who had shouted in French about a fake painting had helped make the world a little more just. So, here's what I want to know. Have you ever witnessed something wrong and stayed silent because speaking up felt too dangerous? Have you ever been dismissed or underestimated because of who you are rather than what you know? What would you do if you were in Amara's position, facing powerful people who wanted to destroy you for telling the truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things in the face of injustice. And please share this with someone who needs to know that their voice matters, that speaking truth is worth the cost, that being underestimated doesn't mean being powerless. Thank you for listening to Amara and Claudia's story, to Leonard Price's tragedy and redemption, and to the truth that art, like justice, belongs to everyone. May you always have the courage to speak when it matters, the strength to endure when things get hard, and the wisdom to know that your perspective has value no matter who tells you otherwise. Keep looking with clear eyes, keep speaking your truth, and never forget that sometimes the people nobody sees are the ones who see everything that matters.